There we go. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's industry information session brought to you by MentorAbility Alberta, as well as the Alberta Employment First Network. And this session is for job seekers experiencing disability and supported employment service providers to learn about the manufacturing sector. My name is Susanna Tawes. My pronouns are she, her. I am the project lead for MentorAbility here in Southern Alberta. I'm located in Calgary. I'm Okinstis, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator today with our guests, Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium, EMC, an inclusive and diverse non-for-profit organization supporting the growth and success of manufacturing companies and employees across Canada. I am joined by my colleagues, Kazim Kazim, project lead for MentorAbility in Northern Alberta, Angela Flaman, Director of AEFN, and Maribel Swama, Communications Manager with AEFN. Today we'll be having a presentation with time for questions throughout, as well as facilitated discussion after the presentation to explore how to connect more people to the manufacturing careers. To start us off, we'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. As I mentioned, I'm joining you from Okinstis from Calgary. I am a settler here. I am originally from Sweden. And we would like to acknowledge that MentorAbility operates in the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples in what is colonially called Alberta, and express gratitude and respect for the land we use. On our decolonial journey, we pledge to dismantle systematic racism within our organization and commit to advancing reconciliation and equitable partnerships as we continue to engage predominantly in Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10 territories, as well as the Métis homeland. We recognize that acknowledgement of traditional land is a start, but what is being asked for is action and land back. And just take a moment to maybe have a thought of where you're joining from us today. And next slide is just a little bit of housekeeping. So for today, we ask that everybody stays muted. We've been told by EMC that they're very happy to have questions throughout the presentation. You can also put those questions in the chat. We'll have Angela and Maribel moderating the chat for us today. And there is closed captioning available through the Zoom controls. So now I would like to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to pass it over to Cindy.
Thank you very much, Susanna. I will share my screen and get our PowerPoint started and then introduce you to our team and our topic. Okay, so careers in manufacturing with EMC. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm here with my colleagues, David Rist. MCM means Manufacturing Consortium Manager. And what that means is in Alberta, David is responsible for making relationships, partnerships, connecting everything that we do here at EMC with everybody who needs us in Alberta. And I'm with Randy Kalaraki, and he is a projects person. He works on a national level, so he's doing projects that run across the country. And the one that he's talking about today will be of special importance to the audience that we've got. And my name is Cindy Maceras, and I'm doing I'm running projects in Alberta. So that's our team for you today. And we're very happy to be here. And I will just, with that, pass it on to David, and we'll go through a welcome and introductions, talk a little bit about who EMC is, and then Randy and I will go from there to talk about the state of manufacturing in Alberta, in particular with youth and individuals with learning differences. So over to you, David.
Thanks, Cindy. Welcome, everybody. I'm real excited about getting to meet with you today. I think we've got a real exciting presentation for you. I think what we're going to be talking about today is just kind of a lot of the conversation is going to be basically what industry is looking for, but more specifically, how you can connect with industry. So, we're going to provide a little bit of a labor market insight. We're going to talk about the youth talent pipeline and our learning differences program and our wage subsidy program. But more importantly, it's going to be how we can help you connect with industry and how we can help you connect with manufacturers if you're looking for a career in the manufacturing space. So we'll be talking a lot about that. We'll also talk a bit about how you can leverage our program. So a lot of our EMC programming and resources are focused around industry, so helping industry with getting resources. So, but we do have programming on the wage subsidy side that actually helps with learning differences and with the youth talent pipeline and also with newcomers as well too. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about and probably kind of insert in and out as Randy and Cindy are talking is on some strategies around how you can potentially leverage those programs as you talk with your future potential employers. So, and that'll be kind of a little bit about of our part of our roundtable discussion as well too. And then we'll kind of end off with a bit of if we have time, we'll talk about some of our upcoming events that are happening as well too. So, can you put it to the next slide there for me, Cindy? So, who is EMC? So, we are a non-for-profit organization. We work with manufacturers in all sectors, all sizes, and all levels of sophistication. So, what that means is we are completely agnostic. So, we work with everybody from food processing to manufacturers who work in the oil and gas sector, to anybody who is in any sector for that matter, metal, food and beverage, you name it. We work with them, and we are a boots on the ground organization. We are led by industry, so our funding comes from industry. We do administer some programming on behalf of the provincial and federal governments, but our focus is industry. How Randy, myself, and Cindy make our money is industry pays for us to do these things. So our focus is around what industry wants. So that's kind of a big part of what we do. And what we try and do is we do that through workforce development programs. We do that through programming like lean programming and boots on the ground stuff to help manufacturers in their businesses. We also do labor market research as well too to support them as well. So lots of different areas of how we support manufacturers at various different levels. And a big part of what we do is we have a peer-to-peer support program. So that's like when Cindy's talking about how I engage with partners and with people. It's really through our peer-to-peer events that we engage with our manufacturing base, and we meet with them and we do plant tours and share best practices. So that's a big part of what we do. It's a big part of who EMC is. Next slide. So today I want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that are affecting manufacturing and some of our top challenges that have happened in the last, I guess, probably 18 months, 2025, 2026. It's been an interesting, I would say, time for a lot of people. Um, we see a lot of different market pressures and I guess uncertainty is what I would call it. I don't know that it's impacting as much as what you'd see probably in the media, but overall, actually, manufacturing in Alberta is doing quite well. But there are some things that we have seen that manufacturers have been exposed to with some of the uncertainty around the CUSMA trade agreement and just some of the changing landscape globally as well too, as we see increased competition, as we see some changes even within our own market as we try to do interprovincial trade. So one of the things I think that we see that we've talked with a lot of manufacturers about and has become a big conversation point in the last year is increased costs on certain materials that they use in manufacturing. So one of the things that impacts manufacturers right now is the cost on certain goods. So we see this in a number of different areas. Aluminum is one area that we're seeing a bit of a cost increase in. And some of that is just because of the aluminum being purchased. We have to purchase finished goods through the aluminum from the United States. So some of those goods have seen tariffs go up on them, and then we've also had tariffs go up on other other materials and metals that are from other places like China as well too. So we've seen some global changes in the cost structure on some of these products. So it's finding different ways to get those products to our manufacturers so they can continue to compete. But the other two areas that have actually been really a big focal point for us, and I think we're going to be more focused on those today, is more specific to workforce and capabilities pressures. So these have been things that we've been working on with industry for the last couple of years, actually ever since probably the end of COVID. We've seen an ever changing landscape in this, is what I would kind of like to call it. We see a huge change in skills and labor shortages. So one of the reasons for that is we have an aging demographic. Not so much in Alberta. We seem to have a healthy birth rate here in this province, but overall as a country, we are suffering. So that does create pressure on our local market. And it's also creating pressure in the sense too that manufacturers are looking for specific skill sets. And so that's been a big issue. And then identifying growing new sources for workforce supply. So that would be you guys um, identifying opportunities to support manufacturing um, with different demographics to come into the workforce. So one of the things, and Cindy will talk a little bit about this, but one of the things that we're seeing is more pressure in terms of manufacturers and employers are not hiring youth and newcomers like they were. They're looking for people that already have experience in a lot of cases coming into the workforce. So it's becoming more and more competitive for people who are entering the workforce versus where it was maybe say 20, 25 years ago. So it's a little bit different, even probably 10 to 15 years ago. The market has changed a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit about that today and some of the things that you can do to kind of distinguish yourself and make you look different as you go out and look for work. Cindy, the next slide, please.
Thanks, David. So it's back to me now. And before I go to the next slide, I'm going to just talk briefly about what does the manufacturing industry look like in Alberta. So EMC works with over 5,000 manufacturers in Alberta. It's a huge number. We know that there are approximately 151,000 jobs in Alberta in manufacturing. And that manufacturing is a top 3 GDP contributor. So just kind of a context to keep in mind as we go through some of the information here. Susanna mentioned that we had done a labor market information study, and David alluded to that as well. And this is what we found in manufacturing in Alberta. We know that 77% of manufacturers plan to expand full-time employment in the next little while, which means almost no one expects a decline in hiring. It shows there's sector-wide confidence and a strong push for people. Excuse me. We know that 68% of manufacturers are facing labor shortages, and 29% of those told us that those are severe challenges, severe pressures that they're facing. 69% told us that they are reporting difficulty hiring and retaining skilled trades. And we'll get into a little bit of what some of those occupations are, because I know that that's what everybody is interested in here. We know that 63% struggle with production, hiring production and maintenance trades, and that there's a perception of youth disengagement, low newcomer integration, and the problem with upcoming retirements. So please forgive me for my voice today. I might just every once in a while pop off and have a drink of water. This slide tells us that it's one of the most compelling analyses that we received from the data, that although employers are hiring youth and they are hiring newcomers, youth and newcomers do not report meaningful participation in the labor market. So even though employers are hiring them, they're not staying. and they're not becoming a meaningful part of the workforce. It's an onboarding, an integration, and a retention issue that EMC is working on. That's one of the things that I'm going to talk with you about today is how do we create better connectivity between the interest in working in manufacturing and some of the reasons that retention isn't there, or onboarding isn't working, or some of the problems that we know are real. So,
Sorry, Cindy, this is Angela here. Just there's a question that popped into the chat that I just wanted to add. Is you mentioned that some of the targeted workforce strategies are youth and newcomers. What about people with disabilities?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that question. That is 100% something that we're working on. That was not part of my project. So the way that we've organized this presentation is for me to talk about youth and newcomers, and then Randy will talk about youth with learning differences.
You're going to enjoy Randy's part of the presentation. No pressure, Randy.
We'll leave something to be desired, right?
So does that make sense? Does that help to set the context?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So the occupations that are very difficult to hire for are licensed skilled trades in production, things like millwrights, machinists, and electricians. 63% of firms across Alberta told us they had reported difficulty hiring for those trades and occupations. Licensed skilled trades in equipment maintenance. Production supervisors and managers in production, manufacturing engineering, and mechatronics, automation, controls, and operational technology. So I'm just going to, at this point, pass it back over to David, because I know this is a big topic for everybody on the presentation today. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what are some of the job categories and occupations and opportunities that manufacturing presents to individuals interested in working in manufacturing. So back over to you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Actually, Cindy and I have had a couple great conversations about this, and plus we've toured around the province and had conversations with industry around this as well too. So I thought it would be a good kind of segue to just sort of talk a little bit about what this represents. So for those of you who are looking to get into manufacturing, one of the things that you need to consider is if you do have a skilled trade right now, it might be something that you can leverage as part of your your job search. So when we talk about licensed skilled trades in manufacturing, electrician is somebody that can be in the manufacturing trades. There are a lot of people that do maintenance work with mechatronics, with robotics, that have to have a background and have to be a journeyman electrician. So if you have skills in those areas, manufacturers are looking for those. You can also leverage these skills in the forestry, metalworking. There's a number of different areas where some of these trades come into play. A lot of people don't realize that there's a need for welders in sawmills, but there is. They have to have people to maintain equipment. They have to have people to maintain and work in the factory itself. Making products a lot of times requires different skills. So there's a lot of different skilled trades that transfer over into different sectors and different industries that will that can move over. Conversely, the other thing is that as far as the crossover is concerned, a lot of manufacturers right now are actually what they're looking for is they're looking for people they'll train them themselves. So there's also a lot of trades, or I would say within manufacturing, that are not what we call red seal. So for instance, a good example of this is in construction specialties, or any manufacturing where they use like thin gauge metals. So like the manufacturing of a metal door window frame or any of those skills, they require welding, but it's cosmetic welding. And there is actually no programming actually that exists in those areas. And so in that specific area, in that field, in that trade, right now there's a huge opportunity because what we're seeing a lot of people retire and move out. So manufacturers are just looking even for people that have some basic skills. So like if you're a handy person, you like working with your hands, and you have had some background in potentially even in laboring or working in a space where you're working with metal or tools or and you maybe don't necessarily have an actual red seal skill. Manufacturers will train you, and they have their own internal training programs. So it's important that you understand that, and that's part of the problem in terms of hiring for a lot of these roles is making sure people understand if you have the willingness. The other thing too is there's other skills that you can put on your resume. You don't necessarily have to be specific to having an actual ticket in them as well. So if you do have skills in those areas, it's good to highlight those and your willingness to learn, or if you have if you've in the past worked in areas where you've leveraged those skills. A lot of people don't realize that being a grinder is actually a skilled trade, but it is. We actually were at a skilled trades competition where they taught some young people grinding, and there is no ticket for it. It's part of maybe potentially being like a woodworker or somebody who's working in the metal trades. It's part of a bigger ticket, but there are people, and that's all they do. So if you've experienced, it's making sure that people understand what those experiences are. Um, so it's not just about going to college. It's about actually, or trade school. It's actually also about being able to be moldable for employers and receptive in that way. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about this later in terms of other opportunities. And one thing I would recommend a lot of people need to look at and do if you want to make yourself more marketable in some of these areas where the trades are important. There's a lot of programs out there. I don't know if our folks that are hosting us today are aware of Braden Institute, but there's organizations like them that actually get funding through the government for like forklift training or for like first aid training or a number of different things. If you can have a lot of those little mini tickets, or I almost like to think of them as for the trade little micro credentials, those are all things that will set you apart when you're on your job search because manufacturers are looking for those things. Those are skills that they would have to train for, and if you have them already, that's great. And then also just makes you look that much more trainable for them as well too. So anyways, I'm going to let Cindy go back to what she was talking about, and I just thought we thought that would be good for you to share. So I don't know if there's any questions at this point. We'll be happy to take them. So
Thanks, David. So I think that the main point that we're trying to get across here in manufacturing, there are multiple ways of entering the occupations that manufacturing has on offer. You don't have to go to school first. You don't have to get a ticket first. Manufacturers will provide on-the-job training. And the example that David talked about, and it's such a good example, is that of welding. Do you have to go and get a 4-year apprenticeship and learn all the welds? No, you can go get on the job training and learn one kind of a weld. And that's one of the beauties of working in manufacturing. And then the job pathways are still there and the advancement is still there. It's just a different way of entering. So thanks, David. So back to the project that I was just talking about with the labor market information. Employers are saying, well, we can't find people. Educators are saying, well, we're training people. So our question is, well, what is happening in between? And we're looking at how does all of this work connect? Because it's not a lack of effort between what the employers are doing and what the educators are doing. We know that we're dealing with two sides of the same system. There's labor demand and talent supply. They haven't always been historically connected. So when we look at why these shortages still persist, the research lets us know that it's a structural issue rather than a cyclical one. So because these pressures are continuously sustained, we know that our solutions have to be systemic. So, for example, David was talking about some of the skills that you can bring to your resume. And I think you've probably heard this 100 times. Manufacturers tell us that they need people who have a reliable attendance, workplace readiness, communication skills, an ability to learn, mechanical aptitude, problem solving, safety mindset, and a willingness to stay and grow. But the interesting thing is that this is what manufacturers tell us that they need, yet this is not what they're hiring for. So there needs to be some kind of an education on going towards manufacturers where they're understanding that maybe what they're looking for isn't always what they're asking for in a job advertisement. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing in terms of these types of skills and how to bridge that pathway from youth and individuals with learning disabilities to manufacturing occupations, because this is the crux of what manufacturers need. Individuals that come to the workplace with these skills can be taught the technical skills. That's the easy part. And back to David now. David just wanted to say a few words about from his perspective as an employer in manufacturing. You might be on mute, David.
Thanks, Cindy. Yeah, we were talking about this as we were talking through the presentation the other day, and one of the things that I really would like to share, I have about 20 years of experience in manufacturing, both working on the manufacturing floor and as a senior leader within a manufacturing organization. So what I can share with you is that, a lot of times, um, some of the things that manufacturers are looking for to kind of set the people apart is, like I'd shared already, some of those other skills that you can pick up beforehand. The other thing too is if, from a manufacturing perspective, I know if somebody came to me, and we'll talk a little bit about this later. I think if somebody were to come to me and they actually knew what programs existed out there as well too, right? So if, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ones that we have that we can offer that are um, opportunities that to help get you employment, in terms of funding that's available for youth and um, in that workforce space. I think if you came to an interview and said, hey, and you built that business plan around when you're actually talking with them or when you're putting together your cover letter and saying, hey, like here are all my skills, this is what I'm able to do. Also, just so you're aware, there's a number of different programs that are available that if you are looking to hire me, um, there's funding available to actually help support that. I know as an employer myself, that always gets my attention. If that means there's potentially funding. I mean, obviously they're going to be looking to see a good fit with you in terms of you being part of their culture. But if you come with that and you show some initiative, I think some of those things are actually important as well too. So like, I think just putting that initial right foot forward, at first impression, showing that you have that initiative, and then being able to show some of the things that you could maybe do to help sweeten the deal in terms of them trying to hire you. So, but yeah, we were talking about that this morning, and I thought, we really need to make sure that the people who are on this call understand that there's a lot of programming that is out there that's geared towards manufacturers, and but it's actually geared to help them actually hire people, and there's incentives monetarily to get them hired. So if you know about those programs ahead of time, it becomes part of it actually becomes a bit of a selling feature in terms of how you sell yourself when you put yourself out to market as a, I know it sounds horrible, but we are in some ways a bit of a commodity when we're in the workforce. So if you can show that you're a little bit different than everybody else and have those resources at your fingertips and be able to speak to them and how that can help maybe get you a job. So that's an opportunity there as well. So I hope our hosts today are good with that, but that's just one other way of kind of putting yourself forward and showing a little that you're a little bit different than everybody else.
Thanks, David. And we were talking about some of the workshops that we went around doing last year from Northern Alberta to Southern Alberta, east to west. And what employers were telling us is that they have turnover rates as high as 40%. So what does that mean? It means there's always opportunities. Employers tell us we might train for months and then they leave. So what is that issue? How do we get to the bottom of it? They're telling us that the people that they want to hire from maybe the more non-traditional pools, such as youth newcomers and individuals with learning differences, don't even know the work exists. So that's an issue. And they're telling us that they recognize that they have gaps and that they need mentorship and onboarding tools yesterday. Youth are telling us, or employers are telling us about youth, that youth treat manufacturing as just a job. But we know that youth are looking for something other than a paycheck. They're looking for meaning and mobility and balance, and they want to do something that makes them feel that they're giving back, and something that will enable them to experience quality of life. So it's not just about the paycheck. So this is kind of the main piece. This is the segue to getting to Randy's part now. We understand that there's a talent pipeline that needs to be addressed. There's a shortage of workers because there's a lack of awareness and exposure to manufacturing occupations. That's exacerbated by a misalignment of how we train, how we hire, and how we retain. So most of the conversations that the workforce has and employers have focus on the recruitment piece, so the entry piece. And that's already too late. Employers need to be entering this talent pipeline at the awareness and exposure stage as well, which means they have to do better at promoting the occupations that they've got, at promoting the kind of opportunities that they have. We've got some employers who are all about trying to figure out, how do I promote why I've got, why my organization is the one that you should come to. And they talk about, I've got great equipment, top of the line, lots of automation. But success here depends on the entire manufacturing talent pipeline. So the project that I'm working on now, and that I've been talking about with Angela a little bit, is creating a set of tools for employers so that they understand how to market these careers to talent, how to create more exposure opportunities. So how can I invite potential labor pools to come and see what they would be working with. And then on the flip side of that, creating the exact same set of tools based on the same framework of awareness, exposure, entry, onboarding, and retention for youth, so that sorry, I keep saying youth because that was my project, but what I mean to say is youth, people with learning differences, and the pools of labor that aren't being tapped in the best way that they can be. So creating this set of tools that will help create a awareness for the skills that we can bring to manufacturing, and how do I figure out how to get more exposure and create networking opportunities and so on. So these are the tool kits that I'm working on, and there will be an opportunity for us to be piloting these tools. And we are really looking for input from the people who are impacted. So it's not just industry, not just employers, it's all of the talent, like everybody here who understands what your own gaps are, or where you need your own bridges. So we're looking for input because we want to create toolkits that are meaningful. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Randy. And I think this is probably the part that everybody's been waiting for. And I'll put my microphone on mute. And Randy, you take it away.
Awesome.
Randy, just before you go ahead, sorry, I'm just going to point out a couple questions in the chat here. And maybe, Randy, you might be the right one to answer them just before we move on. So someone is asking, what are the odds of growth within the company or within the sector, manufacturing sector, if someone hasn't gone to trade school or without going to trade school?
I can go ahead. I'll start with that one.
Sure.
The great thing about manufacturing is that you can get in without having gone to trade school. So then you're working, you're getting an understanding of, you know, what the workplace context is, and then it's easier at that point to continue to get different kinds of credentials so that you can go along and up a career path. So I think the opportunities are the same as if you enter with a ticket. It's just that you arrive differently, you arrive in a different way, and then you achieve your certifications in a different way. So I in my opinion, the opportunities are still there. You're just going about it in a different way.
I can add to that too, as well, Cindy. Like having hired and ran a shop floor, I can tell you right now that what we always, from a manufacturing and an employer perspective, what I can share with you is those who show aptitude. So when we hire somebody, maybe they might start potentially, they may not be starting in a position that is more trade focused. Maybe it's more maybe in the warehouse, or maybe it's in another area. Maybe it's a helper on the shop floor. But those who show the aptitude, take the time, show the willingness to show career, like a growth path in their career, and a willingness to be a long-term employee. Those are the ones that the companies typically want to invest in. So one path is you pay for your ticket and go to school and get that, and then go out and try and find work. The other path is maybe, like to Cindy's point, a little bit different in the sense that you may not start off in a ticketed role, but you might end up getting that same kind of experience, and maybe potentially still be able to get those tickets in the trades. But maybe the company is actually going to help you pay for that versus you having to have to cough out of your own pocket. And sometimes too, there's just in-house training that you'll get training and experience in that will actually propel your career as well too. So I hope that answers your question, but there is kind of, yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Thanks, David. And just one more question here. There's an individual in the chat who supports you through the Learn to Earn program. And other than first aid, CPR, forklift, skid, steer, OH&S certifications, are there any additional certifications that might be helpful, or ones that people don't know about or aren't as common that people should pursue?
I can add to that. You know what? I think any kind of training that you can pick up, or anything that you can try and find where it's at minimal or no cost, or where you can get funding for it, go for it. Like if you're working in a manufacturing environment, if you've gone out and maybe gone in, like a simple course would be like a yellow belt training, which is kind of in the lean realm, so like continuous improvement. You will find that a lot of employers will really like having that on a job resume because it shows they've got some basic project skills, right? And that's something that everybody can benefit from. And also, they teach some basic things around just kind of how things should be put away, and how, like, putting things in order and doing things efficiently. And so it gives you kind of a bit of a grasp of kind of what the environment that you're going into. What there's some basic expectations there. So it's a good course to take. I would highly recommend that. Any kind of little micro credentials that you can find, 1 day type courses or workshops. Um, you know, there are all kinds of there's all kinds of little micro credential programming that even the local chambers put on as well too. And then there's like in central Alberta, there's Karen, like they're an innovation hub. They have like their Catalyst. Well, there's other programs. Just I'll leave it at that. There's lots of little programs out there. You just have to search. If there's something in an area of interest, if you want to get into manufacturing, I would highly suggest just looking for some of those little micro-credentialed courses, and they're pretty easy to find. And really just what you're doing is just Googling for stuff that's free or that you can get a certificate in. It just adds to your knowledge and it's something you could put on your resume. But I would say continuous improvement is one that's quite popular and that manufacturers like to see on a resume. So
Thanks, David. So, Randy, you're
Yes,
up.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank everybody here for joining us today. Cindy, thank you for the wonderful welcome at the start. So my name's Randy Kolaraki. I'm the program lead here at EMC on our Supporting Learning Differences in Manufacturing initiative. So before I really get into the details of the program, I do want to set the stage, framing why this topic really belongs, I think, in today's conversation about manufacturing careers, workforce readiness, and different employment pathways. So the program itself is a national workforce initiative funded in part by the Government of Canada's Opportunity Fund for Persons with Disabilities. So it's funded through ESDC, Employment Social Development Canada, and it's designed to help manufacturers better support employees and job seekers who may experience barriers related to learning, training, onboarding, or workplace communication. As part of this, here at EMC, we've done a lot of research on the sector, information about learning disabilities, and it's pretty shocking. 1 in 4 of those who are currently employed in manufacturing identify as having either a learning disability or a learning difference. Now, I'm going to talk about learning difference in just a second here and what that means. But through this work, EMC, our role is to really help manufacturers create more accessible workplaces and training environments. So this includes helping employers understand how their teams learn, how workplace training can be adapted to remove barriers, and how small adjustments within their organizations can help improve confidence, performance, retention, and career growth for their teams. Looking at the language of using learning differences and learning disabilities. So when we here at EMC use the term learning differences, we're really talking about the different ways people receive, process, remember, and apply information. So this can include people with learning disabilities, ADHD, maybe other learning related disabilities. It may include people who don't have disabilities, or maybe somebody who's never been diagnosed. Or somebody who doesn't disclose a disability at work, or this can include somebody who maybe learns more effectively in their workplace or in their training. Maybe they prefer hands-on, maybe they prefer visual instructions. So we use this term with manufacturers to give a practical and accessible starting point. And especially in manufacturing, where training and safety and workplace instruction is really key to success. I do also want to highlight that this is kind of also where it does connect to a broader pan-disability lens. While this initiative here at EMC specifically focuses on learning-related needs, many of the strategies that support learning differences for employees and what companies are doing to adapt their processes can also support a wide range of disabilities, whether it's cognitive, developmental, mental health, physical or invisible disabilities, and that's not an exhaustive list by any means. So kind of moving on from that. So as an example, some recommendations that we work with manufacturers on to make their work more accessible. Things like clear instructions, maybe a visual checklist, hands-on demonstrations, extra practice time, structured onboarding. That those can be really helpful supports for somebody with a learning disability. But you don't have to have a learning disability for those types of supports to benefit you in the workplace. But at the same time, maybe you're a newcomer, learning the workplace lingo and all the language that surrounds that new job. Maybe it's a young worker sort of entering their first role, or somebody who learns simply, they learn better simply by seeing and doing. So the reason this is so important in manufacturing is there's a big, heavy reliance on workplace training and onboarding. So employees really need to understand safety processes, equipment procedures, quality standards, and often sort of very detailed step-by-step instructions. When that information is not delivered in an accessible way, a very capable person, may struggle, and it's not because they cannot do the job, but it's because the training method does not match how they learn. So for employers, and what we are supporting the manufacturing sector with here at EMC is to help work with them, and they might not realize, their training design, maybe how they're communicating internally, or maybe their onboarding practices may be impacting someone's success. So we want to help those manufacturers to really build more confidence and capability in that area. So a lot of what we do as part of this initiative, so this includes workshops and information sessions for employers. We have supervisor and employer training. We have practical employer and employee toolkits that we've developed. And then we also have the opportunity to connect manufacturing employees with learning disabilities, whether that's diagnosed, undiagnosed, suspected, with the opportunity to actually connect them directly with fully funded supports through this program. So what that means is we've partnered with an organization called VLS Canada. The Virtual Learning Strategist is what it stands for. So manufacturing employees, they receive access to a learning disability risk indicator questionnaire. They're meeting with one-on-one meetings with learning strategists. And where recommended, if there's additional further supports that could be beneficial, such as a psychoeducational assessment, we can connect employees with those supports through this initiative. So yeah, feel free to jump over to the next slide. Next slide there, Cindy. And I'm just following along here on my end as well. So what are we hearing at EMC from manufacturers? Employers want to help, but they need some support, especially when it comes to hiring people with disabilities. Kind of building from this last slide, big reason that EMC is doing this is because the sectors come to us and told us, there's a need for us to be able to support our teams. We've researched between research and direct engagement. We're seeing that a lot of employers want to support employees and potential job seekers that may have disabilities, whether that's a learning disability or any other disability, but they really don't know where to start. So this is really important to know, because it's not a lack of willingness on the employer side. We're supporting and helping to create awareness and confidence for those manufacturers, as well as to and as well as our workplace processes. So I've got a couple of numbers there. I know they're a little bit small, but our research here at EMC showed about 42% of companies are unfamiliar with learning differences, and kind of considering that 1 in 4 within the manufacturing sector report that they self-identify as having a learning disability. There's a lot of non-disclosure that's happening within the sector, and over half of employers said they don't really have a formal process in place. to be able to support accommodation requests. So, and that's something we're really trying to support the sector so that they're better prepared to grow their teams and be more inclusive for those with disabilities. You know, and I kind of talked about, I just touched briefly on disclosure. You know, that's one of the biggest challenges that we hear from manufacturers. You know, if I've got you know, maybe there's somebody on my team who has a disability, but they haven't told me about it. And you know, there is you know, many employers may choose not to disclose for a number of reasons. You know, stigma, fear of being treated differently, uncertain about what to ask for, or you know, maybe there's been previous negative experiences. So for us, you know, we really want to try to support those supervisors and those who are sort of building that next generation of talent to support with training and to recognize, you know, if there's performance challenges or training gaps. You know, it might not necessarily be, you know, a performance issue, but they might be responding to a symptom rather than to a barrier itself. So that's why that supervisor knowledge piece is super, super important. You know, they're the ones who are shaping the employee experience day to day, and they're the ones explaining the task, you know, reinforcing safety concepts, providing the feedback, and helping employees learn on the job. I'm seeing a few questions coming in. So I'll maybe take a pause after this slide, and then we can maybe address a couple of those. So, you know, thinking about where EMC is and how we support manufacturers, you know, to kind of move from awareness to action, you know, providing them resources, providing with the training so that they can better support people with disabilities. So, you know, if you're working with job seekers, you know, before they enter their workplace, you know, you've got a pretty good understanding of, you know, what their strengths are, their learning needs are, and confidence level. So manufacturers, then they're telling us, you know, they need help understanding. So I think this really presents a good opportunity for us to kind of connect and sort of build a stronger relationship on both sides to make sure that the manufacturing sector is well prepared to be able to support other opportunity populations. So I'm going to take a stop there. I know that there's a couple questions here in the chat.
I can read some of these out, Randy, if you want.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one was first there. So
yeah, sure. It says, in addition to people living with developmental disabilities, learning disabilities, do they have any policies or process in place to support people living with physical barriers? An example is, you know, a wheelchair user.
Mm-hmm. So I will say for this particular program, it wasn't physical disabilities weren't as on the forefront. I guess I will say that might be a poor way of articulating that, but I can say like there are a lot of manufacturers who do have processes and policies where, you know, maybe they've adapted their shop in a way that's accessible. So as an example, water fountains were placed at sort of an appropriate height so that somebody who is using a wheelchair can effectively access it, where some of the other ones, you know, may have been too tall. So that's an example of an accommodation that a company has done to actually make their workplace more accessible to all.
And if I could just jump in on that,
Go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, so the question I think is about individual manufacturing places of work, and what we're doing with this project, what Randy is doing is creating awareness around how to better work with non-traditional sources of labor, basically, and this is one of those branches. So what we are doing is creating an awareness campaign for employers, so then employers can take what we are telling them and what we've learned, and then they can implement some of the policy suggestions. So I think that's maybe, hopefully that's helpful too.
Thank you. There was also talking about some of the sensory components within the workplace. And how are those being, what do those conversations look like, and how are those being addressed within the workplace?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. Working in a manufacturing facility, there's a lot of activity happening. There's a lot of noise, there's machinery running, and there's people going back and forth. So there can be somebody with sensory concerns. That's definitely something. If you're thinking about going into a manufacturing career. That being said, there's a lot of accommodations that are available. So, for example, we've got an employer. They're able to provide their staff with essentially noise canceling headsets, and also finding areas where they can work, maybe breaking up their day a little bit, so that if maybe part of the day is in sort of the busier area of the shop, and then maybe another part of their role is in somewhere quieter. Maybe it's a private space where they can complete some other tasks. So there's absolutely opportunity there that can certainly be addressed, and that those are fairly low cost accommodations for an employer to support with. So absolutely, I hope that answered your question. And then sharing contact info afterwards. Yes, absolutely. And then one more here. I see. Can we share the link for VLS Canada? Yep. And Suzanne has got me covered. So thank you very much. Stephanie, great question. Are employers being taught to ask people what they need instead of assuming? Absolutely. So that's been a big conversation we've been having with our manufacturers. Getting to understand what your employees' needs are, and a couple of the main resources that we develop. So we have an supporting learning differences in manufacturing employer toolkit. So this was informed by industry for how do you have those conversations with your staff about what their needs may be. So in that, we're even including supervisor sort of speaking tips, what kind of prompting questions should you ask without making any assumptions. And then we have this available on the employee side as well. So, a company can give this to all of their staff as maybe part of an onboarding package. And it helps to create awareness of learning differences in the workplace, sort of on both sides. And then it also helps an employee to maybe think about, okay, how do I advocate for myself, and what are some strategies that I can take to my employer to tell them about what I might need. So there's kind of an employee tip sheet. So when it kind of follows a pathway where they can say, okay, what is it that I'm doing in my job? What is it that I'm going to be asking for? How should I approach my supervisor around it? So it helps to structure and provide a little bit of guidance to take that as a tool, so that the employee and the employer can meet and have an open and honest, safe conversation. So I'm just looking at this, what disability groups were consulted to help form the recommendations. So we did consult with our partners at VLS Canada. So they are experts in learning disabilities. So they really helped to inform what that toolkit included to make sure that it was in line. I would have to get back to you on the question around episodic disabilities.
Thank you, Randy. There's one more question here, and it has to do with the inclusive hiring process, and wondering if there is an included tailored interview question and process for people living with barriers, developmental and learning disabilities.
So I would say that there's a lot of manufacturers that do have inclusive hiring processes, and I think if you're maybe thinking and looking, getting into a role in manufacturing, that's something you're going to want to look for on, let's say, their job posting. There might be a blurb like, hey, we're an inclusive employer. They'll usually mention something about what kind of accommodations they might offer in that interview process. And I think if you're looking for roles, definitely look for those types of disclaimers. A lot of companies, they'll also put that information. They'll put that information up on their website as well, just talking about what they do for accessibility and inclusiveness within their organizations. So, if you're supporting job seekers, and I would say, those are the types of things you want to look for, because there are absolutely companies out there that are doing this really great work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. And I do want to be mindful of time here. So I just have a couple more slides. I'll go through them a little bit quickly because I do want to give it. So just jumping over to accommodations, and what do accommodations look like in manufacturing, and how does that work? So a big an important piece to know is support is often provided ad hoc rather than in a formalized fashion. So many of the accommodations might be more informal, but sometimes are formalized. In other words, employers may already be making adjustments, but these supports, they really depend on the individual, the trainer, the workplace situation. And it's really great to see that employers are meeting these types of accommodation requests, whether it's an adjusted schedules or breaks, maybe it's a task-specific assistive tool. So as an example, like a digital tape measure, that can be a really handy tool that you might need in a manufacturing facility, adapted workplaces, and then regular check-ins, communication supports. And I think it's really interesting too, like clear step-by-step instructions. That's a very low-cost accommodation that an employer, can provide if there's a particular task at work that maybe somebody may be struggling with. Or a process that an employer can provide that at no cost really to them, that can really make a pretty big impact. And seeing that was the second top most requested, I think that's an implementation that employers are definitely doing a little bit more often right now. So I'll jump just really quickly here to my last slide. Before I do on this segue, any other questions related to learning differences, learning disabilities? I appreciate all the questions in the chat. Thank you so much. But if there are any others, please feel free.
This one just that popped in. As a support worker for our participants living with barriers, could we get a chance to directly discuss the company's with the company's like hiring manager or HR team to discuss some of the participants' barriers and qualifications for specific positions? Are employers open to that, or is there opportunity for that?
That's an interesting question. I would want to take that away. I think that there are employers who would be open to having these types of conversations. And I can say, in my experience, I've worked with a number of manufacturing companies who do, they do like to meet with their HR, and whether they're going into a new training program to maybe understand if there are barriers or maybe they're transitioning roles. So I can say yes, this absolutely does occur. And my recommendation, would just be to approach a supervisor, a direct report, if you're all and think about how you're going to approach that conversation, to discuss, understand maybe what you might need in terms of the barriers you might experience and what you think could help you, because that will really help the manager or HR team to make sure that they can give you the support that you need. And then I see another question here. I work with newcomers and immigrant clients. How are you promoting the manufacturing industry for these demographics? Some of them are willing to get an industry and may have some kind of experience in the sector back in their home countries, but their language level may be on the lower end. Would they have an opportunity to enter the industry, and how? Cindy? Yeah, Cindy, maybe I'll pass that one over to you.
Yeah, so I was just thinking as we're going through all of this information, just thinking about intersectionality and how we don't have like a pot of people looking for jobs who have learning differences, and another pot who are youth, and another pot who are newcomers. And EMC has multiple opportunities to work with employers in all of these areas. And I'm just thinking as I'm beginning to put together the Youth Talent Pipeline project, it's not exclusive of newcomers, and it's not exclusive of people who have learning differences. So I'm trying to imagine what and how we can put some of these ideas into the toolkit and into our pilot opportunities, and how do we create opportunities to get the different organizations to connect. So so yeah, so that's what I'll say. And I also want to point out that, you know, everything that Randy is doing, and everything that I'm doing for that matter, and everything that EMC is doing is kind of based on a framework called Workplace Essential Skills for Success now, which is based on the International Adult Literacy Surveys. And so any of the recommendations and accommodations that we make to employers also has to do with you know, the entire Canadian population from 16 years old to 65 years old who rate at some point on this scale of literacy, and approximately half of our population does not have the skills to engage competently with work, community, and life in general. And so the more that we can tell employers that these accommodations are going to help with productivity, health and safety, retention, promotion, you know, all of these productivity metrics, the better it's going to be for them. So I know there's a little bit of a gap in terms of, you know, when we put a project forward to the government for funding, it has to have a finite content piece. But when we're working with our industry, we know that all of these accommodations help everybody. So the more that we can incorporate the suggestions and recommendations that we get, and we're getting from you today, the better it is for everybody. So maybe Angela and I can continue talking about the next steps in the project that I've got coming up, and how we can make sure that the toolkit we're putting together for employers takes into account, you know, general accommodations for at least 50% of our population, including newcomers and individuals with learning differences.
Thank you, Cindy. I just also want to be cognizant of the time. It's 11 after 12, and I really want to give space for the discussion because I know there's a lot of knowledge here and a lot of information that would be really useful. So I'm just curious, and I don't want to overstep or to take away from the presentation. I just wanted to bring that up.
So we have a list of wage subsidies and employer supports. I think luckily David has spoken about these a little bit. You can look these up, and you can also, I think the best piece of advice from today is if you're applying for a job and you know that there are some of these supports, put this on your resume, educate the employer that you are wanting to work for, and I think that's going to be a win-win. So we're talking today about how best to connect these dots. So you can, like, we will give you our PowerPoint presentation. You can pass this out, and the point on this slide is just educate your employer, your potential employer, and
That's
how
the
about
big one. You know what? If you guys want to move, like it's a very different workforce. Like I'm sure in talking with your folks here that are hosting today, um, it's a very different culture or different environment than it was say, even 5 years ago. So, now everything is done online. So it's all about setting yourself apart, making yourself different, and showing that little piece. So I think if you know about some of these programs and being able to speak to some of it and how you can translate that into a role for you, I think is a big part of this conversation. So,
okay. So here, let's go to discussion questions. And Randy and I voted for David to facilitate this section. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. We have some discussion questions here. So there's a few here. So what are the biggest barriers preventing you from considering a manufacturing career? So this is a big question. I know I've talked to a number of different people, and in various different places around this, and I know in particular, I remember having one conversation with a young lady who had just finished her carpentry ticket, and one of her biggest barriers is she's not always seeing what manufacturers are being presented at career path, like in terms of making career paths more accessible, and I hear a lot about construction and residential. She kind of told me, but um, commercial job site and potentially project management one day. But I don't really hear about enough about skills that I can transfer into manufacturing. So those are some of the things that she was talking about, and she was talking about how she could read drawings and stuff. And so just another barriers culture for her. She's finding it hard to kind of break in because the trades have been traditionally male dominated. Um, but yeah, um, that's just a couple that I know of. So I'd love to hear from you what what you're seeing as you're going out and you're looking for careers. What are some of the barriers that are stopping you?
I've
I
also
see
said,
here.
like, yeah, in the chats, if people want to put their comments in there as well. And Cindy had, at the beginning had said, like, this is an informal conversation, and it's really
Yeah.
to learn. It's really so EMC can understand the participants that we work with, and our sector, so that they can learn and support the manufacturing industry.
Well, I just saw a question actually come up here. Transportation is one of the biggest issues with our clients as manufacturing sites are remote. Yeah, this can be a concern. I know this even with my own kids who we live in the city. For whatever reason, they have no desire. Well, they do desire to get their driver's license, but it's not an urgent thing. So if you're working in a manufacturing environment, a lot of times getting transportation is difficult. Up here we have another one in terms of barriers. I see transportation, lack of class five licensing. Yeah, I see that as well. I think that's a big one. Hard to get a car to be driven to get your full class five when everybody and when everything is so expensive. Yeah, you can't get that. That is actually one of the things that I mean, we've looked at purchasing a used vehicle, and like now, I mean, to get a beater, you're looking at $15,000. It's ridiculous, but so I'd be curious, is anybody else experiencing those things? Transportation is a big one. Thanks, Sydney, for sharing. I appreciate that.
I'm wondering too, with these questions, maybe we could put the questions in the chat and stop sharing the screen and then have so that it's more conversation.
Sure, we could definitely do that.
Awesome.
I mean, while we're talking about this, another question I kind of have, if this is, oh, here we go. Yes, let's see here. Many of my clients are relying on parents and guardians for transportation, which is not always possible for manufacturing work. Not seeing people experiencing disabilities and intersectional identity working in manufacturing and knowing that it is accessible. Yeah, that's true. I could see that as well too. Um, I think it's a different environment because there's very specific, like a lot of times they're looking for a specific task. So that can be part of it. I mean, I will admit that manufacturing, having been in the manufacturing world, and I've worked in a number of other sectors as well too, manufacturers are not masterful communicators by any stretch of the imagination. So this is a new realm for a lot of them. So I think some of it is being persistent. So, um, in terms of, if you are interested, you need to show that interest, and sometimes that is actually trying to make that connection. Um, any other barriers?
Was one from Marie saying that, sorry, I just got to bring those back onto my screen here, sorry. Disability accommodations, particularly around shortened shifts or hours. There's an unwillingness to hire people with disabilities. And then again, just saying that transportation was another barrier.
Yes. There are some programs actually out there that are work or companies that are actually working in that space. One of them is NT Technologies, is a company here locally. They're not so much into like physical manufacturing, but they do work with people that do have physical barriers. They do a lot of work in the technology space, which is kind of cool. They do a lot of digital transcription and media transfer over, and they have a bunch of different tools that they use with the AI. And so a lot of the people they have working in that space have, I would say, they work with have I would say learning disabilities, autism, physical disabilities and barriers. And I know they have an office in downtown Calgary or downtown Edmonton that is fairly accessible, right above a transit station. So
I,
what are go
sorry,
ahead.
David. I would like to say too, I've been working in this field for over 30 years, and I know from at the very beginning, uh, employers in general, especially manufacturing employers, were extremely reluctant to consider anyone who didn't already come trained, didn't already have skills, didn't already have experience, didn't already have like the perfect unicorn coming to them all the time. And there was a time when that was the case. And now when we're looking at retirements and labor crunches, we know that employers are becoming more willing because they have to become more willing to understand how to work better with the job applicants that they're getting. So there has been a definite shift. Like it was unheard of even maybe 15 years ago where employers would even be considering. So I think that's fantastic news. It's like twisting an arm, but we're getting there.
I know actually the one question you have here, what are manufacturers doing well to attract to retain job seekers, the one we had up there. I did actually have a conversation with a fella actually not that long ago who just moved here. And one of his big concerns was actually around Canadian certifications and just what those roles and transferable experiences he could transfer. He had moved here from Nigeria, and it was very difficult for him to transfer some of his skills as an engineer. So that was something, and they have to write different exams and stuff. So it's sometimes that can be a bit of a barrier. I don't know, has anyone else experienced that in terms of those types of barriers and or concerns?
And this is another example of, an individual coming in with all of the skills, talents, and experience that they need, but possibly a language or a culture issue. So how do you differentiate between those, and then how do you train and teach employers what are the skills that they should be looking for and that they can work with? And this it's like um, such a good question, David, because they're coming, they're trained, they're experienced, they have the skills, but might just not have the language to express that they have those skills. So again, more education of the employers.
Well, and one of the things with that question, which I find interesting, is a lot of times too, I've done a lot of career fairs, and one of the things that I find when I'm talking with individuals like that, if somebody is willing and they can afford to take a maybe I hate to say step down, but a lot of people come and they have all these credentials and then they come here and they're unable to access them. But, maybe there is the possibility of leveraging those same credentials in a different career path and starting in another career path so they can at least get that employment, right? And then show that Canadian experience. I've hired a lot of people from other countries where we've had to do that. And they take like a little micro credential program. There used to be the BIM program for in construction manufacturing that a lot of people could take, and they would even pay a little bit of a wage subsidy with that. And I saw a lot of people succeed through that program and then get into project management. So, which is a completely different path, but maybe if you have an engineering background, it's easier to go and get a PMP or a project management designation in manufacturing and then manage projects. We do a lot of custom manufacturing in Alberta and still leverage your engineering skills, right? So that's another path that you could look at as well too, right? So when we're talking about those barriers, it's trying to find other ways to get around to get into the career path that you want to get into.
Yeah,
So
thank you, David. I just want to be cognizant of time as well because we're at 12:24, and there's a lot of different pieces in here as well. I really appreciate everyone sharing what they're seeing as barriers so that we can learn from this. A couple other ones just to highlight is around childcare for women to be able to get in there with long shifts. Another one is about age as well, because there are people needing and wanting to return to work between the ages of 60 and 65. And the couple people have also said that is that limited understanding of even knowing what is manufacturing, who are the companies involved, what kind of roles there are. So I think that awareness piece is huge. And just to make sure that we're answering and looking at some of these other questions as well, I'm just curious from people on the call if there is ideas around tools and resources or partnerships that they see would help job seekers with disabilities and the service providers connect more people with the manufacturing careers. One thing that I heard during the call or through the meeting was to be able to develop relationships between supported employment service providers and manufacturer employers.
yeah, I think in terms of just yeah, I think that's probably the best place to start is starting to have those relationships. Some of those can also be done by trying to go to events, right? Getting yourself out there and networking. I know I talk to a lot of people about networking opportunities. So that's
Mhm.
another way that you can do that. If there's networking opportunities through the local chamber or through local business groups, those are also opportunities that you can get involved to meet manufacturers or meet people as you're looking and doing your job search. So those are some
And
other.
Randy, you've got a number of events coming up too, right? That would be, I think, perfect for.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we are going to be launching a bit of a five-part training series, it's targeted towards manufacturers, but I do think that there's value across, other industries. That's going to be launching. The first one's going to be in late July, but it's really about, what can companies do to support learning differences and disabilities within their organizations, whether it's supervisor training strategies, whether it's during the onboarding or hiring process. That'll be upcoming. It'll be available on EMC's website. If it is something that's of interest to you, I strongly encourage you to check it out. And then we do also have, I know I referenced those toolkits very briefly. Those are also available on our website. I'll actually pop a link in the chat that links directly to the programs page. So feel free to poke around. And if anybody has any questions about any of this, please get in touch with me. I'd love to connect.
Thank you, Randy. And also, what we'll do after this session is the recording will be added to our YouTube channel, and people can ask and also provide us with some of their answers to these through email and offline as well, and then we can provide those information to you as well to EMC so that the conversation can continue to happen. One other one here too that just came up was workplace walkthroughs and educational sessions designed specifically for youth could be great opportunities. I think that would be, I know something with MentorAbility is doing mentorship matches and having worksite tours is something that is extremely helpful, not just for the job seeker or the employee, but also for employers so that they can see the people that are interested in those careers. So I definitely see that as a great possibility for something that could be looking as a partnership or as a tool or resource for employers as well.
That would be great, actually.
Yeah, we've got Technion is actually one of our employer partners with MentorAbility, and so we've had a tour of their manufacturing facilities, which has been really great. So very happy to have further conversations. I'm also wondering if people on this call or on this meeting are interested to continue this conversation and provide more feedback. Would there be other opportunities to do so?
Well,
Yes.
AEFN would be
Yeah.
happy.
Short answer.
Yeah, to support another conversation and just maybe to have some roundtable conversations just to with some of the questions, and we can definitely look at coordinating that with EMC and MentorAbility.
That sounds wonderful. Great. Yeah, people are saying that would be great. I want to be able to also say a big thank you to AFN for co-hosting with us today, and for Cindy and Randy and David for coming today and sharing about the manufacturing industry and sector. It's been hugely educational and really appreciate your insights as well around how to differentiate yourself within these, what tools are out there, and that there's different ways to get into manufacturing, not just the traditional trades certifications. So really thank you for your time and for your information. There will be a follow-up email to everyone, and we will have a feedback survey that goes to a third-party auditor, GGI, that's looking at the MentorAbility program across the country to see what's working and what we can do to change it. So it should take about 5 minutes of your time, and we greatly appreciate everyone's ability to do that. And I also just want to pass it over to Angela for closing comments.
Again, I just want to say thank you to EMC, Cindy, Randy, and David. Thank you, Susanna and Kazim with MentorAbility. These are our amazing partners that we continue to create space to have these conversations so we can learn more about the industries, that we can support the employment sector to have more access to the roles, the skills, what's required within the industries and those pieces. So we will continue to provide these sessions and partner. And we will look at doing a follow-up session. I think there's a lot more information that everyone would love to learn a little bit more about the manufacturing. So we will have some further conversations, and then we will keep everyone posted on an upcoming session. And again, hoping to have a roundtable to continue with some of the great conversations and the questions.
And
Perfect.
thank you for the opportunity. It was great.
Thank
We're
you
happy to
very
be of
much.
service and look
Yeah,
forward
thank you
to
for having us.
continuing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.